picture the quintessential Western movie in your mind, like right now.
Oh, yeah.
You are probably visualizing a lone, stoic hero, right? Just framed against this expansive, punishing sky.
Right, you can almost feel the heat radiating off the dirt.
Exactly. You hear the rhythmic creak of a leather saddle. You sense the tension as a dusty standoff looms outside some wooden saloon. And your brain just automatically categorizes all of this visual data and screams, American Wild West.
It is the cinematic grammar we all know.
But let's flip the geography entirely. So the landscape you are picturing is not Monument Valley.
No?
And it certainly is not Texas. It is actually the rural, windswept steppes of Turkmenistan.
Right.
And that lone, stoic hero squinting into the sun, he is not an American cowboy at all. He is a Russian revolutionary.
Which just completely shatters your cinematic expectations. I mean, filmmakers basically took the established visual grammar of the cowboy.
The framing, the pacing, all of that.
Yeah, the whole aesthetic of the frontier. And they applied it directly to the Bolsheviks.
Which is wild. So welcome to our deep dive into the source material covering the Ostern, or the Eastern.
A massive, just genre-defining phenomenon.
Totally. Created in the Soviet Union and the wider Eastern Bloc, they took the classic American Western, which is, arguably the ultimate symbol of Hollywood and American individualism.
And they just completely reinvented it for a Cold War audience.
Right. So our mission today is to uncover the mechanics of how this, ultimate American cinematic export got co-opted, turned entirely upside down, and lovingly recreated behind the Iron Curtain.
And ultimately spawned these massive cult classics and bizarre cultural obsessions along the way.
It is such a trip. So to set the groundwork before we get to the films themselves, let's talk definitions.
Right. So the term Ostern is just a simple portmanteau. It fuses the German word Ost, which means east, with the English word Western.
Makes sense.
But the source material reveals that the Eastern Bloc essentially deployed two very distinct strategies, or subgenres, to tackle this format.
Right. So first you have the Red Westerns.
Exactly. These films are actually set in the American Wild West. They feature the traditional saloons and cowboys and all that.
But they weaponize the setting, right, to deliver a radically different ideological message.
You nailed it. And then you have the true Easterns,
which abandon the American setting entirely.
Right. They use the structural bones and the visual style of a Western, but they place the narrative domestically. So typically on the Central Asian steppes of the USSR during the chaotic years of the Russian Revolution.
Okay, so that dual approach, it highlights a glaring logical paradox right at the center of this whole genre's creation.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, the Soviet Union was famously draconian about its cultural output. They were strictly guarding the public against capitalist Western influence.
Right. Very strict ideological control.
So it just defies logic that an anti-capitalist state would end up mass-producing movies based on the rugged, hyper-individualist cowboy. The mechanism behind how a collectivist society adopts a capitalist hero is just fascinating to me.
It is. But resolving that paradox requires looking at the highly porous borders of the early 1920s.
Okay, so go back further.
Yeah, because American Westerns were actually being imported into the early Soviet Union, and domestic filmmakers were eagerly deconstructing and borrowing from that visual language.
Really? Even back then?
Oh, yeah. A perfect example from the research is the 1924 silent comedy, The Extraordinary Adventures of Mr. West in the Land of the Bolsheviks.
I love that title. And the premise of that film operates like this sort of cultural funhouse mirror.
Exactly.
An American millionaire and his hired cowboy travel to the USSR only to get relentlessly scammed by Soviet crooks.
Right. They isolated the American hero and dropped him into a Soviet reality to intentionally demonstrate the superiority of the collective over the, naive individual.
Right, using the cowboy as a literal stand-in for the entirety of the United States.
Exactly. And they continued stripping the Western for parts the very next year.
With the 1925 action film Red Devils, right?
Yes. They took the kinetic action templates of a Hollywood shootout and just overlaid them onto revolutionary fighters.
Okay, so the cinematic foundation was clearly laid, but as the political climate shifted into the Stalinist era, those Western-inspired films practically vanished from public theaters.
They were deemed utterly incompatible with Soviet realism.
Right. The state-mandated art that glorified the worker and the unified collective.
Which leaves absolutely zero narrative room for a lone vigilante doling out frontier justice.
Right, no room at all. But this brings up a detail from the research that feels almost fictional. I had to read this twice.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
While the genre was officially suppressed and hidden from the general public, Joseph Stalin was an obsessive, die-hard fan of Hollywood westerns.
It is wild, isn't it?
It is nuts. The very leader who is actively restricting this media for the masses was allegedly hosting private movie nights to watch cowboys shoot it out.
It is just a stunning display of the psychological dissonance inherent in authoritarianism. I mean, the leader cleanly separates his personal desires from what he deems, ideologically safe for the broader population.
Do as I say, not as I watch.
Exactly. Stalin's craving for the genre was so intense that he reportedly ordered the 1937 film The 13 to be shot simply to satisfy his own appetite for Western-style action.
Wait, he essentially commissioned his own high-budget fan fiction.
Pretty much. He wrapped it in just enough Soviet context, so setting it in the Karakum Desert with Red Army soldiers to justify its production.
That is unbelievable. So, okay, if the genre was largely pushed underground or, locked away in Stalin's private screening room, some external force had to break the dam to turn this into a formalized, continent-spanning genre.
And that catalyst arrived during the Khrushchev thaw in the 1960s.
Following Stalin's death.
Right. A period of de-Stalinization relaxed censorship, just enough to allow certain foreign films back into Soviet cinemas.
And the most consequential of those screenings occurred in 1962 with the American Western The Magnificent Seven.
Starring Steve McQueen.
Yep. And it did not just perform well.
Oh, no. It became a colossal commercial juggernaut.
Right, an immediate cult classic.
Because the Soviet public had been starved for character-driven, sweeping action epics.
And Steve McQueen offered this brand of quiet, rebellious stoicism that just resonated deeply.
Absolutely. But that overwhelming public response created a massive headache for state-run film institutions.
I bet. Suddenly there is a ravenous demand for an inherently American capitalist art form.
Right. State studios had to capture that revenue and audience enthusiasm.
Yeah.
But simply tracing an American movie frame by frame is not a sustainable way to build a Soviet genre.
No, of course not. You'd get shut down immediately.
Exactly. So there had to be a transition period where the audience and the filmmakers negotiated how this new format was going to function without triggering state censors.
And that negotiation happened through the mechanics of parody.
Yes. This is crucial.
The breakthrough that formalized the genre for the masses was not a serious action film, but a 1964 Czechoslovakian comedy called Lemonade Joe, or The Horse Opera.
Calling it a horse opera tells you exactly how self-aware the Czechoslovakian filmmakers were being.
Right.
Because it was a satire, ostensibly mocking the American Western. It slipped right past ideological hardliners.
So functionally, that parody acted as a Trojan horse.
Yes, exactly.
Because you cannot laugh at a satire if you do not understand the source material. By watching and laughing at Lemonade Joe, Eastern Bloc audiences were receiving a covert crash course in the cinematic grammar of the Western.
They were learning the tension of the saloon, the mechanics of the quick draw, the pacing of the standoff.
And once the public fluently understood those tropes, Soviet filmmakers no longer needed to hide behind parody.
Right. They could use that exact structural framework to tell sincere, politically aligned narratives.
Which brings us to the Red Westerns. With the vocabulary established, studios began writing their own ideological sentences.
Particularly driven by East Germany's DIFA studios.
Right. Now, they were reacting to the massive success of a 1962 West German and Yugoslav co-production called Treasure of Silver Lake.
Yes. The East German state recognized the cultural impact of that film and decided, we need to engineer our own counter-narrative.
And their response was the 1966 seminal film The Sons of Great Bear.
Which really marks the moment the genre moves from mere imitation to active weaponization.
Weaponization is the perfect word for it, because for decades, Hollywood Westerns generally framed the U.S. cavalry or the white settlers as the noble heroes,
right,
and the Native Americans as the savage antagonists. But The Sons of Great Bear takes that exact structure and rotates the moral compass 180 degrees.
Completely flips it.
The Native Americans are the clear-cut protagonists fiercely defending their homeland, and the United States Army represents an invading imperialist force.
Think of this cinematic strategy like a brutal judicial cross-examination.
Oh, I like that analogy.
The East German filmmakers took America's own beloved mythology, the romanticized rugged frontier, and used it as evidence to convict the United States of historical imperialism and violence.
Wow. Yeah, they deployed the visual language of the West to systematically dismantle the moral authority of the West.
Exactly.
And the psychological resonance of that specific framing led to an absolutely bizarre cultural fallout that you almost have to see to believe.
Oh, the hobbyism?
Yes, these East German films, which became known as Indian Air film or Indian films, starred a German-Serbian actor named Gojko Mitic.
Right.
And he played these heroic Native American leaders with such gravity that he became a massive star.
Huge star.
And it ultimately sparked a widespread movement of Native American hobbyism across Germany.
Which sounds completely surreal today.
It does. You had thousands of German citizens actively impersonating Native American culture, forming clubs, studying the history, and holding immersive camps.
People actually setting up camps and living it out.
Yeah.
But, the depth of that hobbyism reveals why the narrative hit so hard.
How so?
Well, in a divided, highly policed Cold War Germany, the concept of an oppressed indigenous group fighting back against a sprawling, industrialized military machine carried profound emotional weight.
I see.
The audience was projecting their own anxieties and desires for resistance onto these characters.
So the films transcended simple entertainment.
Absolutely. They became a vital vehicle for expressing deep-seated political and social frustrations that just could not be voiced otherwise.
That makes a lot of sense. So while East Germany was meticulously reconstructing a subversive version of the American West, Soviet directors realized they were overcomplicating the physical production.
Right. They did not need to fake the Mojave Desert or cast European actors in Native American roles.
Because they had an unfathomably massive, untamed frontier right in their own backyard.
Which birthed the true Eastern. Filmmakers took the established cinematic mood of the Western and transplanted it entirely into domestic Soviet history.
And the undisputed masterpiece of this era is the 1970 film White Son of the Desert.
Visually, the translation is just seamless.
It really is. Instead of a lone gunslinger wandering Texas, the film centers on a demobilized Red Army soldier making his way across the blistering rural steppes of Turkmenistan.
But the audience still gets the sweeping, widescreen shots of empty, unforgiving terrain.
Right. The reliance on horseback, the sun-drenched standoffs, the lawless environment, they are all present.
But the context is entirely localized. He is navigating the chaotic, violent aftermath of the Russian Revolution, battling counter-revolutionary warlords.
Because the mechanics of the traditional Western are perfectly suited to the Russian Civil War.
They really are. Both narratives involve a total collapse of formal authority.
Right. Vast geographic spaces where the law is dictated solely by whoever holds the gun.
And a harsh, isolating environment that rigorously tests the character's morality.
And the public response to White Son of the Desert proved the viability of this fusion.
I mean, the numbers are staggering.
Yeah, it pulled in over 34 million viewers in a single year.
Which is just astronomical.
To put that figure in perspective, 34 million viewers means it was not just a hit movie, it was a unifying cultural event.
Oh, yeah. Lines from the script became permanent fixtures in casual Russian conversation.
Much like how quotes from Star Wars or The Godfather permeated American English.
Exactly the same phenomenon.
And once the domestic frontier model proved it could draw a third of the country to the theater, state studios across the Soviet sphere began eagerly adapting the formula to their own specific local geographies.
The inherent adaptability of the format is what makes the genre so enduring.
Totally.
For instance, the Tajik SSR produced Meeting at the Old Mosque in 1970.
Okay.
The Uzbek SSR delivered The Seventh Bullet in 1972. They even expanded the frontier across oceans.
Right. In 1973, there was a Soviet-Cuban co-production called The Headless Horseman.
Which just sounds incredible.
It does. And digging into the logic of that Soviet-Cuban production is fascinating. Fusing a cowboy aesthetic with a Caribbean island and Soviet ideology sounds chaotic on paper. Yet it works because the Western isn't actually about the physical American West.
Right.
It is about the friction between civilization and the wild, between the isolated individual and the changing times.
Exactly. As long as a country has a history of political upheaval and a rugged landscape, filmmakers can successfully plug the Western formula into it.
And that plug-and-play nature explains exactly why the Austrian spread far beyond the Soviet Union into the broader Eastern Bloc,
Just as the Italians localized the genre in the 1960s with the spaghetti western.
focusing on heightened violence and deep moral ambiguity.
Right. The Eastern Bloc countries developed their own highly specific regional variants, complete with their own culinary nicknames.
Which gives birth to my favorite subgenre title of the era, the Jabonica Western.
Yes.
From the 1960s through the 1980s, Yugoslavia produced these films focusing on World War II partisans fighting fascist forces in the rugged Balkan mountains.
And they cheekily named the genre after a traditional Balkan pastry.
Taking a direct, self-aware shot at the Italian spaghetti western.
It is brilliant.
It is a brilliant pivot, swapping out the cowboy for the anti-fascist guerrilla fighter, but retaining the dusty shootouts, the rugged terrain, and the intense moral posturing.
And Hungary took a very similar approach with the goulash westerns throughout the 1970s.
Another great name.
Right. Director György Samjas made notable contributions like the 1976 film The Wind Blows Under Your Feet.
Yeah, and what is most compelling about the Hungarian films is how they managed their distinct geographical limitations.
Because Hungary does not have sprawling, arid deserts.
No. But Samjas understood that the landscape in a Western is actually a psychological space. It represents isolation, hardship, and the insignificance of man against nature.
Right.
So he shot his films in the Hortobágy National Park, which is essentially a massive, flat, grassy plain.
It was the absolute closest thing Hungary had to a wasteland.
Exactly. It's like kids building an epic fortress out of whatever furniture is in the living room.
I love that analogy.
By meticulously manipulating the camera angles, isolating his characters against the brutally flat horizon, and emphasizing the sheer emptiness of the space, he successfully manufactured the feeling of a desert without a single grain of sand.
Because he was prioritizing the cinematic mood over literal geography.
Yep.
And that ability to divorce the mood from the physical location is exactly what allowed the Ostern to survive the collapse of the very political system that created it.
That's a great point.
The Soviet Union fell, but the cinematic framework endured.
Mm.
In 1993, Kazakhstan released The Wild East, which successfully pushed the genre out of the historical past and into a post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Wow.
The frontier simply shifted from the 19th century Central Asian steppes to a dystopian, irradiated future.
Man, the journey of this genre is wildly unpredictable.
It really is.
We traced it from the psychological dissonance of Joseph Stalin locking himself away to watch forbidden Hollywood shootouts,
Right.
to East German studios cross-examining American imperialism by turning Native Americans into the heroes of the frontier.
And we saw the formula perfectly mapped onto the Russian Revolution in White Sun of the Desert,
Pulling in 34 million viewers.
before ultimately settling into the grassy, faked wastelands of the Hungarian goulash westerns.
It just demonstrates a profound truth about how human beings share stories.
It does. The structural architecture of the Western scape, the conflict between the law and the lawless, the lone individual navigating a hostile landscape, it does not exclusively belong to any single nation.
Right.
It is a deeply modular vessel, constantly waiting to be filled with whatever local values, historical traumas, and geographic realities a culture wants to pour into it.
No one owns the format, which leaves a lingering question for you as you reflect on this deep dive.
Yeah.
If the ultimate piece of American cinematic mythology, the stoic cowboy riding across the plains, can be so effortlessly adapted to tell Soviet revolutionary tales, anti-fascist partisan epics, or Kazakh post-apocalyptic survival stories, what does that say about the core nature of our heroes? Is the Wild West actually a physical place on a map? Or is it simply a universal state of mind that anyone, anywhere can claim as their own?